The structure of this lecture is going to go something like this: war, happiness, and then war again. So let's start with the first war, or rather series of wars, and those would be the Greco-Persian Wars. There's, a lot more to the story than this, but just to sum up, we have our friends in ancient Greece, over here, all the different little city-states, and right next door, you'll remember from back in chapter 2, you've got the Persian Empire. So this in the yellow here, this is the Persian Empire, and then over here you have your little independent Greek city-states. Well, there's, again, all sorts of twists and turns to the story, but the two sides go to war. Persia essentially tries to absorb the Greek city-states. You see how big their empire is. They sort of push out. They would say they're provoked, and try to, envelop this little orange bit over here. And they fail. Surprisingly enough, amazingly enough, the Greeks, the Spartans, the Athenians, the Spartans with their, great warriors, and the Athenians with their incredible ships, they defeat the Persians. The Persians are not able to conquer the Greeks, and the Persians sort of backtrack back into their big empire. The Persians do not conquer the Greeks. The Greeks win. So that's the big amazing thing, and it sets the stage for the next little bit. The Greeks defeat the Persians for a number of reasons, but, part of it is because of, the brilliant battle tactics of the Spartans and the Athenians, and then part of it is just because the Athenians are so good with their navy and their boats. Anyway, the point of it is, Athens, Sparta, the Greeks, they win. And in the aftermath, by far the two most powerful city-states are Athens, which is over here, and Sparta, which is over here. What Athens does, they're really good at things like, alliances and diplomacy and trade and all that sorts of good stuff. And they form a defensive alliance called the Delian League. You see it here in green. So it's sort of all those green city-states. And they form an alliance saying that, hey, if any of us are attacked, we will all come to their defense, right? So again, this is a very sort of simple alliance. If any one of us are attacked, we will all come to their defense. And again, Athens is sort of the big city in all of this. So that sets the stage for, what's going to, I'll give you a spoiler, what's going to be a war later on is something's going to happen with one of these little cities, and then there's going to be a big fight. So you've got all these places are aligned with Athens, and Sparta is not super happy about that because they're worried that Athens is rising up at their expense. They're worried that they're going to get eclipsed and that Athens is going to be the most powerful and that they're going to be sort of second fiddle. So they actually set up their own alliance called the Peloponnesian League that's a rival alliance. They grab a bunch of these cities and say, hey, you're loyal to us now. But we'll deal with that in a minute. It's during this time, during the time after the Greco-Persian Wars, that Greece undergoes what I'll go ahead and call its golden age. And it's called the Age of Pericles by many, named after this guy, Pericles, who is the leader of Athens through this time. Pericles furthers the reforms of Cleisthenes, and under him, Greece really, truly does become this amazing, again, direct democracy. This is, in contrast to our own democracy, in this place, the citizens can vote on sort of every single issue. You don't need to worry about your senator voting on an issue. You can go to the assembly, and you can, stand up and speak and have a voice in every single decision that's made. As long as you're an adult male. What's more, in their democracy, you could vote on way more things than you can vote for in ours. Their assembly was intimately involved in, tactics of, war and stuff like that. They would, have debates in the assembly with all the citizens and vote on, which way to send the ships. They would get sort of that involved into the nitty-gritty of governing. They did have some elected officials. For instance, Pericles is one, but their elected officials had to get reelected every single year. You couldn't serve for more than a year. So Pericles is in charge for many, 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 many years, but he's got nothing like this sort of long term where he can make all these decisions. He has to run for reelection essentially every single year. So if he ever did anything bad or got unpopular, he would be immediately kicked out. They could also vote on stuff like this, which is a particularly interesting facet of of the Athenian democracy, they had a process called ostracism, in which they could vote someone out of Greece. It was used for sort of unpopular, again, overly ambitious politicians, and if 6,000 people voted you ostracized, you were kicked out of the city for 10 years. So if someone could drum up enough support to boot someone out of the city, they could get voted out of the city for 10 years and then come back. This was used because the Greeks were always afraid that someone was going to take away their democracy. They were always afraid that some wannabe tyrant, some sort of evil guy scheming to get power, would overthrow the democracy and set themselves up as a king. They were sort of always worried about that. So ostracism was supposed to be a tool you would use against someone that you were afraid was going to take over the city. But the Age of Pericles doesn't last forever. Nothing does. The Athenians had the Delian League, which again they thought made them safe. It's all this green stuff here. But the Spartans had the Peloponnesian League, all this stuff in blue. All of these cities were loyal to Sparta, and they all said, hey, if any of us are attacked, we will all, come to the defense of whoever. So this has the makeup, this has the ingredients for this sort of massive Greek war, right? If any of these two cities get in a fight, then all of them have to join in and have to go against each other. And again, Sparta was worried that Athens was getting, way too wealthy, way too powerful, and that Sparta was going to, the Spartan influence was going to decrease. So this is exactly what happens. Two cities, one from the Delian League and one from the Peloponnesian League, start going at it, and then the rest of them join in, and you have the Great Peloponnesian War. That is to say, essentially Athens and friends versus Greece and friends. And it's this devastating war, lasts for a really long time, fighting and fighting and fighting. Athens was really rich and powerful beforehand, but, the war really sort of drains them, drains Sparta too. Really, everyone gets weak, and finally it ends when, Pericles dies. He's not able to, lead Athens anymore, and sometime after that, they hold on for a while, but sometime after that, Athens loses, and the winner of the Great Peloponnesian War is Sparta. Sparta defeats Athens, and Sparta becomes sort of the most dominant of the city-states, but they themselves are so weakened that, shortly later, and we'll deal with this in another section, another power is going to come in and conquer the whole place.